So I am out here storming the culture. That's storming the culture to my homies. And I ended up at the library. And I was at a table beside an older woman who was tutoring a younger boy. And he had done something she didn't approve of with his homework and proceeded to belittle him and berate him and essentially make him feel small. She was very domineering. Her voice was very stern. She wasn't sharp so much as she was domineering. And it went on for a long time. And he was having trouble recovering emotionally. You could tell he was really stiff. And he eventually got to the point where he was crying. And she said, "Stop that." And he went to the men's room to wash his face. And I left because, listen, nobody's perfect. And yes, we do need to parent and not let children get away with things that are inappropriate or not their best work. Encourage them to do their best. But we certainly can do it in a manner that is nurturing and explaining why we want them to behave differently. And we are certainly setting the example for how a young boy who grows up to be a man perceives women. And if we're always sharp or domineering or belittling or essentially bringing them to internal tears, if not external tears, then it's no wonder that there's problems between the sexes. But it reminded me of a kid's book that I have become very enamored with of late, and it's called No David by David Shannon. And he is also an illustrator, and boy did he do a tremendous job. This book is 28 years old. It's going on 3 decades now, so I'm sure many people out there are familiar with it, but I wasn't. And if you read it with eyes open, looking at the illustrations, you'll see that it's actually a grown man's story told through the eyes of a 5-year-old boy. And a lot of times in life, for men and for women, this is what life seems like. This is the back of the cover. No, 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 stop doing that. And now, granted, the story is from the perspective of a 5-year-old boy, and he does many things that are wrong. But if you read it as an adult, and I wrote an article on this that you can find at Storm the Culture, and it tells the story of what men go through in this very cruel world that most women don't have any perspective on. That being said, I wanted to show you the cover of this book. It is he uses bright colors, and he's really does a tremendous job, and you just cannot help but fall in love with this kid, this boy, this little 5-year-old boy. So here he is. This is David. Now we'll just leave the 2 lost souls swimming in a fishbowl for another time. But there's something very unique about David. And if you zoom into his smile, you can see that his teeth are sharpened. Yeah, that's a thing. And something I had never heard about, but I did some research on it, and apparently it is a thing in South American countries um, with the warrior, more male oriented or warrior oriented, to make you fierce looking before your opponents. And it's also used in some African cultures with women as a mark of beauty. Talk about going through torturous beauty routines. Having your teeth sharpened would be one of them. And I'm trying to be positive about it, but it's straight up torture. And it got me to thinking. And I never picked up on this before. I have read the Bible repeatedly, but every day there's something new that I'm shown, and this was one of them. Do you know that tooth sharpening is mentioned in the Bible? First of all, we all remember if in Song of Songs or Song of Solomon, however you refer to it as, there's 2 references to teeth. And like not my crooked buck teeth, but like something completely different. It's mentioned twice. It starts, the first mention is in chapter 4, verse 2. And this is the male talking to the female, and, what would you call that? Sweet talking her. And if you ever wanted an example of how to sweet talk somebody, Song of Solomon is definitely it. It says, "Your teeth are like a flock of newly shorn ewes, which have come up from their washing, all of which bear twins. And not one among them has lost her young." Now that's pretty interesting wording. They're all like a flock of newly shorn ewes, and which would be female sheep. So that's interesting, that it's a reference to sheep, we the people. And they've come up from their washing. They're clean. They're, purified, sanctified. All of which bear twins, and not one among them has lost her young. So, interesting wording when you consider it. Anyways, just to continue with the Song of Solomon, it's also mentioned again in verse 6, and it's almost verbatim, but I'll read it again. "Your teeth are like a flock of ewes, which have come up from their washing, all of which bear twins, and not one among them has lost her young." So, teeth and smiling and is part of the courting ritual, and that is important, because if God said his only decree, his only command, his only issue was to say, go forth and multiply, man and woman, go forth and multiply. This is part of what it means for a man and woman to spend time together and to have it be warm and welcoming. And a smile is important, and teeth are important, not only for eating, but for those micro expressions of affection for one another. So if the devil is going against everything that God plans, well, here's just one more way that he can turn it on its head. And he turns it on its head by destroying the teeth of the sons of man. And what does that do? Well, first of all, it makes them stern because they never smile. They keep their lips together. They hide their teeth. They don't want to smile, of course. They don't want they don't want anybody to see what has happened. Eventually, probably, if they come from money, they are soon able to buy a partial or a cap or a full denture. This is torture. There's no other way to say it. We should be having a national discussion on how this is. CSA needs to be stopped. And the thing is, it's generational. And the perpetrators were once victims themselves. So it's a thorny, twisted thing that never seems to see the light of day or justice. But it needs to be dismantled with a wrecking ball. Extra points if you know where that came from. So in Psalm 57 verse 4, it says, David is complaining. This is verse 4 through 6. David is complaining about being surrounded by his enemies, a reoccurring theme with David, and he's lamenting to God, and he's one of my favorites because he doesn't sugarcoat it. He says it like it is. He doesn't say like everything's fine. Everything is not fine, okay? Everything is definitely not fine, but he knows the source of his comfort and rescue. So, my soul is among lions. I must lie among those who breathe forth fire. Even the sons of men whose teeth are spears and arrows. Wow, now all this time we've been thinking this is figurative. No, actually not. It's not. Look at all the celebrities who have dentures. And you're telling me that the money they came from, and oftentimes from well-connected backgrounds, or families who were in Hollywood or in music, and they didn't have nutrition or orthodonture or dentists to have nice teeth. I mean, I had all, and you can tell like it's shifting, but they don't have good enough teeth to be on film. They have enough money to buy partials and dentures. Chuck Norris, the epitome of health, and he didn't have his natural teeth. And there's many others. And of course, dentures look much more natural than they did when I was young. They look, it's sometimes it's very hard to tell, but just be aware of it, and maybe you'll see it. Anyways, he continues on, but that is the part that I wanted to read to you. And it, again, in Proverbs 30, verse 14. And again, I'm going to read this whole thing from verse 11. This is chapter 30 from 11 to 14. Because this gets to the heart of the matter. There is a kind of man who curses his father and does not bless his mother. Might that kind of man be one who is abused? There is a kind who is pure in his own eyes, yet is not washed from his filthiness. Could that be the kind that feels entitled because he went through so much trauma and he's hardened and lost the ability to self-regulate or have compassion? I'm not making excuses, but at the same time, when someone's brought up in this kind of environment, these are the kind of things that need to be thought of. There is a kind, oh, how lofty are their eyes, and his eyelids are raised in arrogance. Some versions refer to this as pride. There is a kind of man whose teeth are like swords, and whose jaw teeth like knives. They devour the afflicted from the earth, and the needy from among men. So, their teeth are sharpened, their teeth are like swords, and their jaws like knives. Another form of torture is to dislocate the jaw by keeping it unnaturally opened for long periods of time. So things that we often refer to as metaphorical are not metaphorical. They do happen. And, Jesus came, this whole thing, to put an end to this type of thing. But you just can't see it. It's hidden in plain sight. So, if you go back to this kid's book, this child's book, and read it from the perspective of an adult, you will, you'll see some really interesting things. But one of the ones that I wanted to show you is one of my favorites. So David got himself a pair of epaulets, and he's saying, and his mom is saying, David, be quiet. And I'm saying, David, do not be quiet. Storm the culture.